In today's video, we're going to update our equipment system one more time, and this time we're going to update so that our UI will display more items as well as the equipment that we have equipped, and we'll give some default equipment to our player. And we're also going to make some changes to our stat section up here. And you can see it's not all fully functioning yet, but we're just going to get all this UI set up and working so that we'll be ready for the next video where we can equip the items. Hi, my name is Michael. Welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. Follow along and learn how to create your own ARPG in Godot 4 using GD script. All right, so looking at the next big step in our equipment system, we need to make some updates to our inventory user interface so that we can kind of support the things that we need to. Let's go ahead and run the game and take a look at what we currently have. Okay, so when I look at my inventory, let me go ahead and pick up a couple items here. But this inventory system is fine. We've got our stats over here, but we need a section for equipment. And that probably means we need to decrease the amount of screen real estate devoted to the stats. And also, I'm going to take this inventory section. We're going to double the number of rows. And so it'll take up kind of half of the inventory page right here. Okay. And so looking at that, as we do this, we're also going to make a few changes to how the inventory works, and we'll get it set up so that when we begin equipping items, we'll be a little bit more prepared to work with that. So in order to kind of get going with this, you don't need to grab any assets if you've already grabbed the download from the itch.io page from my previous video. But if you haven't, then what you'll need to grab is in our, let's see, I've got this items or this gear PNG, okay? And this gear PNG, as you can see, it contains really small there. There we go. It's got these little icons that we're going to use for our equipment. Okay, so make sure you've got that or something similar to use for the inventory. And once you do, then we're ready to get going. Okay, so let's go ahead and open that inventory scene. And let's see, I've got mine under GUI somewhere. So GUI, pause menu, inventory, and actually, I think it's just part of the pause menu, isn't it? Okay, pause menu scene. There we go. So the inventory is kind of the first scene that we've got in here. Let's start with this panel container that we've got. We've got this panel container and a grid container, which contains all of our inventory items. Okay, let's take this. In fact, let me grab this description first real quick. I'm just going to drag it down out here so that it doesn't get covered up. But I'm going to take this panel container and I want to kind of resize it. But actually what I would rather do maybe than resize it is I'm going to take this inventory item and I'm going to duplicate this so that we've got 20. Just like that. And this is the size that I want the inventory to be. And what I've done here is I've kind of pre-created all of these inventory. If you remember, we were instantiating these kind of on the fly every time we load the inventory. And I thought that was a fun way to do it. And it certainly served a purpose, an educational purpose in the series that we've been going through. But I'd like to change that from this point forward because I think I would rather have just this fixed number of slots and then they can just be empty or have an item in them, right? Because our inventory items do support having an empty slot. So we're going to go ahead and do that and make that change to our inventory. So go ahead and duplicate what I've done here. And that's going to require some code changes as well. That's going to affect a few parts of the system. So step one is just updating that. And then I'm going to take this description here. I'm going to drag it back up now that I know where this kind of fits. And I want to make it wider so that even if we hover an item over here in our equipment section, we can display a description of that. And then we need to rearrange these and we need to make space for our equipment right over here. So right now, this little stat box, while it looks nice, it takes up a whole lot of space. And so I'm going to go ahead and open this little scene up and just kind of work on it here. It's going to be kind of hard to adjust and know exactly how it fits. So we're going to have to hop back and forth between the pause menu and the stats. But if you recall, when we set this up, and if you followed along with the tutorial, we've got just kind of a series of VBox and HBox containers that kind of keep all of this stuff wrapped up together. And I don't think that's a terrible way to do it, but we just want to maybe reorganize some of this. So like, for example, I've got an HBox container here. I'd like to fit both my experience and my level maybe within this one HBox container. So just by dragging and dropping, that does a decent job of resizing that. But of course, when I come back, well, if I save it and then go back to my pause menu, it's too big now. Okay, so we're going to have to make some adjustments because we've got some minimum sizes, I think, on some of these. So let's check this out. Like on the layout, this has a custom minimum size of 60. I'm going to reset that. Same with the level. I'm going to come down here and reset the custom minimum size. And if we save this and go back to the pause menu, I'm not, well, it's probably because it's stretched out. There we go. That's kind of working. So now I can resize it smaller. But I should have checked. We had a fixed width that we was kind of our target size before. So like if I look at this one, this is 196 pixels wide. I think it'd be good to get this layout to kind of fit the same, 196. So let's go back over to stats. And you can see we're just a little bit larger, 205. We want this to be 196. It's not going to let us do that while these are occupying all that space. So let me just poke around here. We've got our HBox container. I think it really just comes down to minimum sizes on these labels, okay? So if we look at this, this has a custom minimum size of 60, and the experience points probably has the same. Looking at the layout, custom minimum size of 60, okay? We've also got some padding on this stats container. So theme override styles. If we look at our style box container, content margins, we've got 10 all around. So that's about 20, right? So if we're talking about 196, then we need to subtract 20 pixels from that, and that's the total width. So what does that put us at? 176 wide. So if we look at our labels, we can kind of do some math to get this to work out. So I'm going to say custom minimum width on the label is maybe something like, what did I say? 176. So if we go like 53, and actually this one, not so sure actually. Let's see. Hold on. Let's get a calculator out. Okay, so we had 196 minus 20, and then if we divide this by 2, we've got 88 pixels. So that's 88 pixels per both labels. So I think this custom minimum width of 60 looks okay for that one. Let's decrease this though, and let's see how 40 looks. And I'll do the same for this label. And I'm just keeping them about the same dimensions just to make it line up, but we may not want to do that, especially for this XP. I kind of want that to be able to be wider. I'm going to make it 60 so that if that number gets large, it'll fill just fine. And then this label for the level, because we're adjusting things, I'm just going to go ahead and rearrange. Like maybe this is left aligned. And then, looking at our label here, this, I can clear that custom minimum value. There we go. We've got a nice, like the level number sits right next to level. And I may even want to come in here and just look at this font. And I'm probably going to have to change the font sizes a little bit, or maybe not the font size, but the font family that we're using. Where the heck where's my font? I guess I never applied a font to this one, so I could come in here and quick load. Like I kind of actually want this to be bold. So I'm just going to keep the same font, but make that level bold. Okay. Experience points looking okay. I'm going to go ahead and delete this other container. And then I want to get my attack and my defense kind of grouped together in a similar fashion. And this is going to probably break our script, right? Because we are moving things around. But that's okay. We'll handle that in just a second. But now all of these labels, I'm going to select these and I want to apply a different font to them. I want to make these ones smaller. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to quick load a font and choose my small font. Okay. And that looks pretty good. Obviously the sizes, the widths aren't very good. But if we look at that calculator, 88 divided by 2 is 44, right? So we could make these 44 and get rid of the little spacing and they would line up pretty good. We do have the spacing and we probably want to keep that though. So let's look at our HBox container. And it had the default separation, which I don't know what that is. But if we check this box, then we can just apply a custom amount. So let's say it's 5 pixels. Okay, so what that means is if we select these, there's 1, 2, 3 spaces of 5 pixels. So that's 15. So let's get our calculator back up. And we had 176 minus 15. Now, if we had that, this is kind of an awkward number, is it? It's not going to divide by 4 evenly. What if we did 176 minus, I don't know, like 12? 164? 82? Okay, so then what that means is we would have to adjust our spacing to be 4 pixels. And then I'm going to select my labels, go to the layout, and then the minimum width on this is going to be half of 82, right? So 41. Boom. Okay, now we've got the right width. I'm going to go ahead and save this, look at the pause menu, and that does look about the size that I want. The spacing of it doesn't seem quite right? But it's the same. Oh, it's a little bit bigger. Maybe I can resize it. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so once I get it to the minimum size, it does match. So now I just need to adjust it evenly. You can do this by eye. You could use some other container type to help if you would like as well. I'm going to drag that up just a tiny bit, and I'm going to do the same with my panel container for my inventory, just because I kind of want to make sure these look good. I'm going to drag out a ruler. This is something that we haven't done before, but just a little ruler guide so I can see where I want those to line up, and that looks nice. Let's go ahead and put one at the bottom here as well. Okay. That way we know where to line up our gear. And then looking back at this stats menu, I should be able to, decrease the size. I just want to go back in here and lay this out a little bit more nicely, I guess. And I'm not 100% sure what I want, but maybe I want to take the two labels that have the value and make these left aligned. And then, if I look at the attack and the defense, maybe I actually want to reset the custom minimum width. Did that work? Didn't seem to work on this one. Hold on. Layout. Oh, I think I've also got it container to set to expand. So I can turn that off. There we go. Which that was nice. It was nice how it kind of auto-filled. Boink. Okay. But this way we get our text lining up with each other a little bit. And then now if I look at this, let's see. We do need some way to get these all to kind of line up. Just because it drives me nuts if they don't. And I'm going to take let's go up here, level with these level and experience things. I'm going to do the same thing. I just get rid of expand. I don't think this one had it on there, but let's just check. Oh, it did. Okay. What we could do is actually maybe take these labels and expand them. I don't have a huge plan here. You guys are just watching me kind of figure this out. I'm going to turn off the size, container sizing, expand. Okay. That looks okay. That means if I give a minimum width to this of 176 pixels, looks like we're already there because we kind of already got there. Okay. Now this label, let's take label 2 and label 4 and let's turn on, let's go to layout, reset the custom minimum width. And I'm going to say container sizing, expand. Now I just want to get these all to line up, and then I think we'll be good to go. And, you can adjust this how you like. Actually, everything's looking pretty good, except I said I want those to line up. What I really want is I just want this one. I just want this one to line up. So I'm going to give this a custom minimum width. And I didn't check what that was before, but it's going to be somewhere around here. 45 maybe? Okay. I kind of like how that looks, except my experience label should be left aligned to match the new style I'm doing. Now, if I look at this, let's see. What's my size on this sucker right now? 196. Save that. Okay, there's a little bit of janky messing with that, but now we've got a much more minimal space requirement for these stats. And again, you could change this how you want, but I do want a little bit of space next to the attack and the defense, because let's go back in here and let's look at these stats. I'm gonna be doing some things with the stats where I kind of want to be able to add on to these maybe. So like when we go to equip an item, we need a second piece of the stat that can show if it's increasing or decreasing the attack value or the defense value. And so, hey, look at that. That kind of messed up the sizing there, didn't it? Okay, so we can kind of work on this a little bit, but I'm going to take this these labels, I need to start giving them unique names so that we don't break it. Like if I run this right now and try and pull up my inventory, we've got errors, okay? And the reason we've got errors, if you look, it can't find these labels because we've moved them, okay? And so that's one danger. Now, there is a way to avoid this, and it probably would have been easier to change this before we moved things, but what I want to do is take each of these labels and give them a name that is unique to them. So like this is label 2. Let's call this label underscore level. And then we could take like this label 4, which is the XP, and call it label underscore XP. And then do the same with these. We've got label underscore attack and defense. And so now what we can do is if we select these, you can right click and say access as unique name. And once we do that, you get this little like % sign on there. I'm going to do that with these ones as well. And then I'm going to open up my stats script. And in here, where we've assigned or made a reference to the nodes, we can delete that. So like this level label, I can just drag and drop. Boom. And you see how that uses % and just the name of the node instead of this $sign and a path to the node. That means that no matter where we move the node, as long as the name stays the same and that little setting stays on, then we can just access this in code without having to change the name or worry about breaking a reference to it, okay? So this is a handy thing. Then if I come back in here later and think like, oh shoot, I want to move this around, we can do that. Now, just looking back at the stats, I do want to add this in. So I'm going to duplicate this label for attack 2, and I'm going to call it attack change. And I'm going to do the same for the defense. Rename this to defense change. And then I do want to grab a reference to these, and they are already flagged because we duplicated them from these. They've already got that unique name flag on there. So just go back to the script real quick and grab those two, click them, drag them in. And then if you're holding control or command on a Mac, there you go. You've got these references to these new labels. And these are the labels that will update when the player's going to equip something. So it might look something like +1 attack, right? And that's funny. I didn't realize you could change the text with them both selected, and it updated them. So now that we've got that, I do need to come back in here, and I want to make sure that these look okay, that we're not getting some weird spacing issues. So I'm going to take these labels, I'm going to adjust them one more time. And for the layout and container sizing, I'm going to get rid of expand on the initial labels. And then we'll take these secondary ones, and they should have expand on already. So I think we're good, but let's just check it out. Yeah, okay. So now if I save this, I might have messed up the size, but maybe not. There we go. Okay, perfect. We will eventually be hiding these, but now you can just see for reference that we're going to increase or decrease the defense by a certain amount. And we'll also color these like, we'll make it green if it's an increase or red if it's a decrease, okay? This is all just setting it up so that it will work in the future. And then because we've renamed these and updated our code, let's just make sure that those unique name changes are working. So we'll just run the game and run our inventory. Okay. You can see though that we've got an issue here because we made 20 items in our inventory, but we're only seeing the 10 here. So let's address that. Now, as we address this issue in our pause menu where we've got these rows that are disappearing, there's a lot of code that I want to update kind of behind the scenes that references and works with all of this. So let's just look here in our inventory scripts folder. We've got these 4 script files. And let's first begin with the one at the top, the inventory data. So the inventory data is a resource class, right? And we use this to kind of just keep track of the inventory on the player. And in fact, if we kind of look through, if we look at our grid container where we're displaying our inventory, you can see we've tied this player inventory resource. I'm going to show this in the file system. It's right down here. Okay, and let's look at this. So first of all, we've got a resource that has 10 slots. So let's go ahead and change that to 20, just like so. Okay, and then I'm going to save that change and just run the game. That should be enough to get us more inventory slots displaying in the menu. Yeah, there we go. because now it's creating 20, right? It's creating 1 box per slot, okay? So theoretically, we could then really fill this up and get all the way down here. But there's some more changes we want to make to this inventory data as we prepare for our equipment. And so let's update our code. We need to be able to take into account that we're going to have some new inventory item types, the equipment. And we also want to kind of keep track of the fact that we're going to have some slots that are unique or specific to our player's inventory. And so let's start with the signal. This is very simple. We'll just add a signal called equipment changed. Okay, so anytime we try and equip something new, we can emit the equipment change signal. All right. I also want to, so let's talk about our slots. I made this 20, but I actually want to increase this to 24. Because if we look at our inventory, we're going to add a section over here for the slots, the equipment slots, and there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. There's going to be additional slots. Okay, so going back to the script, we'll just keep that in mind. But I'm going to put a variable in here that kind of keeps that takes account of those, and so I'm going to just call this equipment slot count, and this will be an integer, and it'll equal 4. And so if you, for some reason in your game, decide that you want more slots, you could change that number, okay? And then just looking through here, we've got a lot of good code already in this resource to help us add items and things like that. We need to modify that a little bit, but also in order to be able to make it easier for us to manage or display inventory items, I want to add a couple new functions as well. So we're going to add a function that helps us easily determine how many inventory slots we should have and how many slots are equipment slots, right? Because let's just run this again. Because I increased my inventory size to 24, now if I pause the game, it's like, wait, added 4 more slots down here. And we don't want that to happen, okay? But I do want to keep the equipment as part of the same inventory item because maybe just because of personal preference. I guess I don't have a great reason other than I kind of like that. It does also make it easier, I suppose, to save and load because then we can just save all of the inventory and load it with the same functions we've used in the past with just minor modifications. Maybe that's the primary reason I guess I made that choice. But if you don't like this, you could definitely split this up and have a separate array to track equipment and things like that. With all that explanation aside though, what I want to do here is I want to create a function to get the inventory slots and a function to get the equipment slots. So let's make this first function and we'll just call it inventory slots. This is going to return an array of slot data, okay? So you see how we've got our slots up here, right? There's slot data like that. I'll just copy that. We want to return that. But the thing is, right, we're not going to return all of them. We only want to return the inventory slots that are not equipped items. This is pretty simple. We'll just say return, and then we're going to say slots.slice. And then let's look at this slice function. So see, this slice function is unique to arrays, and what it does is it returns an array containing the variance within the slice that we're creating. And you can see it accepts an argument for the begin of the slice and the end index of the slice. And then there's some other things like a step and a deep. The step would be like every step. So if you wanted to slice every other item in an element or every third or something, you could use that. We don't need the step in our case. So 1, you can see is the default. And then I think would be good to go. And then this deep, if it's a nested arrays or things like that, it helps deal with that so that there's some recursiveness. So it'll check the array and then children arrays. We don't need the deep either. So we'll just leave that as false. So we really just need those two, begin and end, to tell us what we're going to get. And obviously what we want to get is we want to start at the beginning of the array, so 0. And then we want to get everything except those last 4 items in our array. So I'm just going to say 0. And then I'll say, this is kind of funny. We could say like 20, right? But we don't necessarily know the size of our inventory. We're going to get that from here. We could also say, so we could calculate that, right? Like we could say slots.size minus equipment slot count, like that. And this would give us 20, right? Because we'd have 24 is the size. Whoops. Did not want to do that. We'd have 24 and then we'd subtract 4. So we get 20. But another thing that you can do that's really cool with arrays in Godot here is we can say minus 4 And what -4 will do is instead of counting 4 from the beginning, it'll count 4 from the end. But obviously, real quick, I shouldn't say -4, right? We should say minus equipment slot count. That way, if your slots for your equipment are 6, it'll be -6. Okay? Really simple way to just say, this is what I want. And so we have another function that we're going to create. And this function is going to be the equipment slots. And this will also be returning one of these arrays. So I'm just going to copy that just to make it quick and easy. And this one will return a different set of slots. So we'll say slots.slice. And then what we're going to do here is we can take this number, right? Because we can do the negative for the start as well. It doesn't have to be at the end. So we'll start at, in our case, -4 from the end of the array. And then we'll go to the size of the array. So we can just say slots.size, just like that. So there we go. 2 quick functions that will give us just a segmented portion of the array. Now, if I run this, it's not going to be using those yet. So you'll see we still got those. I just want to set those functions up. And then actually, before we finish these, I want to just take this inventory data. Because I'm looking at this player inventory resource here. These are the actual items that will instantiate by default in our game. So I'm going to go to the second page. You can see we've got so many results that it's got paginated results for us here, right? We're on page 1 of 2. And if I look at this page, how we're going to do this is slot 20 is going to be weapon, slot 21 would be armor, slot 22 is going to be the amulet, and slot 23 will be the ring. Something like that, right? And actually, maybe this 20 I want to be armor and 21 to be weapon. But regardless, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to quick load, or I can't quick load this. I need to make a new slot data. Here we go. And then in here, I can actually put an item. So by default, our player has some stuff, right? He's got armor. And so the item data I want here, I'm going to say quick load, and I'm just going to look up armor tunic, and he'll have 1. Okay. And then in slot 21, his weapon slot, I'm going to do the same thing, make a new slot data. And then I'm going to say quick load on the item, and I'm going to find my weapon, the iron sword. So these are some of those resources we created in the last video. Make sure we give him one of those. So now if I run the project, I should have those in my inventory. Oops, except I messed up. Did I put the katana in there? I've got a standard sword and I've got the katana. What did I do wrong? Let's look at this slot. Well, I did pick armor tunic, but apparently I didn't save this properly. It's got an attack. This should have a defense. Or maybe I updated those values wrong last time and I didn't even notice. I don't know. So this should have a defense of 1. Save that. And actually, let me find the resource down here real quick. Armor tunic. Okay. Yeah. So I think I must have made a copy and not saved it properly. So let's just update this. Hopefully you guys didn't have this same issue, but I think this was at 96. And then let me put a description in here. I'm going to get rid of that line return because we've now got a much wider description box. And we just call this tunic and cape. Okay, I hope by updating this, we're not ruining our katana. Okay, defense 1. Let's just check this katana real quick. So I'm going to do Control S to save and open my katana. Okay, this is still a katana. And it still has attack. Okay, I think we're good now. So let's try running this again. Now, if I look at my inventory, there we go. We've got our tunic is clean and pressed, and the sword. Obviously, we're going to get rid of this row, but just for now to show you, we're going to build some basic equipment into our default player inventory. And then as we equip things, what we're going to be doing is like, essentially, let's just pick up these items. If we equip, look at that, it resized, funny. But what we're going to be doing is like when we equip the armor, we're just going to swap this inventory slot with the armor inventory slot. We'll just swap those 2 items. And same with the weapon, right? They'll just swap. So even if your armor is like down here, we'll just swap it. Okay, so that's what our code's going to do. But so you can kind of get a sense of how this is working and how we're building this. So the next step is just going to be to take these 4 items and populate them in a UI over here instead of continuing it on right there. And we have these 2 functions that we just created that'll help us do that, right? So looking back at our inventory data, We've got inventory slots and equipment slots. So let's go ahead and utilize that right now so we can get the equipped items out of our inventory array. And in order to do so, I'm going to close a couple of these bits of code here. We need to open our inventory UI script, which should be this one on the grid container. Yep, there we go. You can always just find that in your file explorer, right? But in here, we have a function to update our inventory. Boink. And we're going to have to make some changes to this. But for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to update this. We're going to change this. So we have 4s in data.slots, right? And this is just iterating over all the slots. And so the first thing I'd like to change is how we do this, okay? And let's do this. Let's create a variable, and we'll call this variable our inventory slots. And let's go ahead and make sure that this is an array of slot data so that we have it typed properly. And then what we can do is, instead of just getting our data.slots, we can say data dot, right? Because data.slots is what we're iterating over here, but we just want the inventory slots. So this function, okay? So that'll give us that subset. And then what we can do for right now, we'll change this again later, but for right now, I want to say 4s in, and we'll just say inventory slots, just like that. Now that should allow us to just have the 20 items that we want at the beginning. So if I run this one more time, boink, there we go. We've just got those 4 rows, and we don't see the equipment slots, right? We don't see those extra 4 slots for the equipment, okay? So there we go. Some updates, getting our inventory working a little bit better. Now let's go back to our inventory data. And since we were touching this code, I want to make sure that we take our various slot changes into account when we're adding items. So here in our add item function in the inventory data, see, we're doing the same thing. We're just checking for the slots and making sure we can update it. And that's fine. We don't need to change this necessarily. But here for I in slots.size, what we want to do is we want to get the inventory slot size, don't we? So we can change slots to inventory slots.size. Okay, or you could do slots.size minus equipment count. One way or the other, we need to only iterate over the actual unequipped inventory items. And then I think the rest of this is good, right? We just kind of go through and iterate over them, and if we find an empty slot, then we can just add the item. But this first piece of code handles where, well, we already have the item, let's just add an additional one to the inventory, increasing the quantity, right? So we only needed to update this here. This will be fine. And there we go. We're all done with that. Let's just leave these changes alone for now on the inventory data script, actually, and let's go back to our pause menu, and let's get this new container that we need for our equipment. And what we're going to do here is we can kind of duplicate maybe this panel container, just like so. And then I'm going to drag it over. Now, obviously, duplicating this as is isn't ideal because we've got a whole bunch of stuff in here, not to mention this grid container's got a script on it. But really what we need is we just need to quickly get the same style of container and have something we can work with, right? And our inventory is going to be like 2 rows and like 4 or 5 columns. Well, 4 actual columns and maybe a spacer, which is great because we've got 5 columns here. So let's just go ahead. I'm going to take this grid container while it's selected, and I'm going to I want to get rid of the script that's on it because I don't want this inventory script on here. So just scroll down in the inspector and you'll find the script, and you can just hit this reset property button. There you go. It'll get rid of the script on it. And then we only need, we actually only need 4 of these inventory items. So I'm just going to select the rest and delete them. Okay. So here we go. We've got these 4 items, not quite ready to go yet, right? I'm going to take each of these inventory slots and let's rename them. So I'm going to resize this just so we can see. So we've got the first one. So let's say inventory slot underscore armor. We'll call this one weapon. Actually, I want this one to be amulet. You'll see why in a second. Because we're going to put armor here and then weapon below it, right? And then we'll have amulet and ring. And so as the rows go, it's kind of out of order, right? So we've got armor, amulet, and then we'll have weapon as our 4th slot there. And then finally, the last slot will be called ring. Okay. And then we just need to add some other things in here to kind of space this out. And I'm going to go ahead and in the grid container, I just want to add a texture rectangle. So if you search for texture rect, you get this little control here. And I'm going to drag this actually to the front. And we want to set a texture. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new texture here, a new Atlas texture. And we're going to be using that same texture that we've used for the other gear thing. So I'm going to take the gear, drag it onto my Atlas, and then just come in here. If we look at this and edit the region, what we want is we just want this little armor piece here at the beginning. So that's actually a 16 pixel by 16 pixel icon there. That's rough. I'm going to just manually type in the width and the height here, I think. So 16, 16, and then the Y should also be 16. Okay, there we go. So we've got this armor. It's stretched and looking really funny though. That's okay, we'll deal with that. So what we need to do is we need to adjust some of the settings. So right here we've got expand mode, keep size, stretch mode, scale. Let's change this stretch mode to keep centered. And then if we go to our layout and give it a custom minimum width and height of 32 pixels so that it matches these, now it fills a nice little grid there, right? And it's just got our armor icon in the middle. So now I can just take this and duplicate it a couple times, and then we'll just adjust these and sprinkle them throughout so that we have one next to each piece of the inventory. And actually, I'm going to take this second texture rect, I'm going to duplicate it, and just going to clear the texture on that one so that we've got a nice space. So icon, slot, blank icon, icon, slot. And then we'll do the same down here. Just duplicate that, take this texture rect, boom. So that gives us the perfect spacing that we need for our grid and panel container. Now I should be able to resize this now. Yeah, very nice. And in fact, I should maybe just resize it the smallest it can be, and then just take this whole container and drag it down. Okay. And voila. It's starting to actually look pretty decent, I think. So let's just take each of these icons and update them. This will be our amulet. So we just need to come in here. And let's see, we'll go to edit region. The amulet is this, this top right one. So whatever that, I'm going to come in here and type it. That's 16, 0, 16, 16. Okay. Now, I made a mistake because these are all linked. So let's undo that. Noob mistake. What we need to do is for each of these textures, before we change this atlas, we need to come in here and say make unique recursive so that it'll make this a unique resource, and the changes that we put in here won't affect the others. There we go. So let's see, the Y was 0, I think. That's our amulet. We'll come down here to our weapon and do the same thing. Make it recursive, or make it unique recursively. And then let's see, the X is 0, the Y is 0. And then width and height are still 16. And then we just come to our ring slot, and one more time, just do this again, make unique, recursive. And then just put the X to 16. There we go, got our icons. So now we've got our gear inventory kind of set up and ready to work with. And so what we need to do is be able to display the actual items that are equipped in these slots. Okay. So let's go ahead and take care of that next. So we're going to take these inventory sections, and I've got names and I've kind of got them all set up, but where are we going to handle this? And I think the inventory UI script is a fine place to do this. So let's go ahead and just go back to this script. What I want to do though is I want to get a reference to each of these. So I'm going to take the ring, weapon, amulet, and armor inventory slot nodes and just drag those in here, get a reference to them. And actually, hang on, before I do that, in case we move them, let's access these by their unique name. Boom. Okay, much cleaner. Inventory slot underscore armor and so on. So now we have access to these, so we can handle these uniquely. We're gonna write code specifically for each of these slots. Okay. So let's look at this update inventory. So what I want to do is we've got our inventory slots, and we've kind of made a reference here. And here we're looping through the inventory slots. And one thing I want to do is instead of iterating over this, I want to change something, because there's something I had mentioned at the beginning of the video that I don't love anymore, and that's instantiating a new little, node every time we do this. And I really don't like that approach anymore for this because it actually makes the equipment part a little bit more difficult when we actually go to equip items. And so let's go ahead and address this now. I'm going to go ahead and delete all of this here. Okay. And we're going to change this loop too. So instead of iterating over the inventory slots, I'm going to change this. We're going to say for I in, and then we're going to get the size of the inventory slots. Okay, so we're going to iterate over it by index now, and then we're just going to do 2 lines of code in here. So it's actually simpler. We'll first get a reference to the slot. Okay, so this is a inventory slot UI node, right? And this will just be get child at that index. Okay, because this script that we're writing this on, it's this grid container right here. All of its children are inventory slots. Okay, so we'll get the child of that. Oh, I've got this issue here. Update inventory at I. I'm actually going to let's just rename this to _I for now. Okay. And then what we can do here is, okay, we're going to get this inventory slot. Let's fix that real quick. We'll get this inventory slot item. And then all we're going to do is we're going to say slot. In our inventory slot UI, if we look at this, it has a function to set the slot data. And this will update the texture and the text on the slot. So we can come back here and just say slot.set. We'll say slot.set slot data. And then we can just pass in here. We still need to find that slot, right? We can say inventory slots. And then we'll just grab the slot at that index as well. Okay, so we'll just do that. We're just going to pass that data in. And then after this loop is going to handle all of our regular inventory. And then we'll just handle equipment slots right here. Okay, we'll do that code in just a minute. And then I'm going to go ahead and, because of the way we're doing this, we're not going to have to do this awaiting the process frame anymore, which sometimes caused issues before anyway. So I'm kind of glad to get rid of this. So I'm going to just delete that line of code. And then what we're going to do is I want to just grab focus of the first child maybe. Now we only need to get this child focus sometimes. And so I'm going to change this index here. We no longer need this index because we're changing how we do this. And I'm just going to say apply focus. And this is going to be a Boolean. And we'll set it to true by default. Okay, so then let's just implement this little Boolean here. We'll just check if apply focus. Then we'll grab focus of the first child. So then sometimes we don't have to grab focus because in the previous version of this code, because we deleted all those nodes and then added new ones, we had to remember where was the user selected, and let's make sure we reselect the new inventory at that slot, right? We no longer will need to do this because we're going to update our clear inventory, and we'll do that just right here, but we're going to no longer be removing all the nodes. Instead, we're going to leave those inventory slot nodes there. And so if one was already selected, it'll stay selected. So it becomes quite a bit simpler. So let's just look at the clear inventory function, and we can kind of change this a little bit too. So we're going to say for C in get children. And then instead of queue freeing these, all we're going to do is we're going to say set slot data. And then we're just going to pass in a null value. And then we need to do one more thing before this will work. So instead of removing the nodes, we're going to put a null value, which is like no item, right? But then the update inventory will go through and assign the correct item as needed. So we still are kind of clearing the inventory each time we load it and then setting it, but just in a different fashion. But let's look at this set slot data function. So this is in the inventory slot UI node. Now we need to make sure that we can handle null values properly in here. So let's just check it. If slot data equals null, return. That's okay. But we actually need to go a little bit further, because if there was an item there and then it becomes null, we want to clear the texture and the text label. Okay, so here in the null condition, we're going to say texture rect, right? See how we're setting the texture and the label? In fact, let's just copy those 2 lines of code and just paste them. So if it's null, then we'll put a null texture in here, because you can assign a null to a texture. And then this label text, instead of setting it to this string, we're just going to set it to an empty string. Okay, let's go ahead and save that. Hopefully we got all that working. Let's run the project here. And I'm going to grab a couple items. Okay, here we go. We've paused the game. inventory still working, no bugs. And we can even come over here to our equipment. We haven't yet populated the equipment though, have we? So let's go ahead and take care of that. But you can see that this is already working a little bit better. Okay, so back to our inventory UI script. Here where we said update equipment slots. We just need to handle that here now. What we're going to do is let's get our equipment slots. So we'll say, I'm just going to abbreviate it, E slots, right, is another array of slot data. And this equals slots dot, and then what did we call it? Just equipment slots? Oh no, it's not slots, it's data. Sorry, data dot equipment slots. Okay. Now here, now that we've got a reference to those equipment slots, we know in this example we've got 4, and I've kind of already predetermined that which slot goes where. So we just need to take each of our inventory slot references. So we've got inventory slot armor, and then we'll say set slot data. And then we just need to pass in the correct slot. So we'll say E slots, and then I think we said armor would be at index 0, the first item, right? If we look at this player inventory, boink, right here. So the first item that I'm referring to is the first of those last 4. So that's our armor, and then we'll have weapon is the second, which will be for index 1, right? Because instead of 20, we're subtracting 20 essentially, or we're only looking at these last 4. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we're going to have inventory slot. I'm just going to copy this whole line and paste it. And then let's just update these. So the next inventory that we want to update is weapon. And this should use slot 1. And then we'll set the amulet. And here we can use 2. And lastly, the ring. And this should be slot 3. 3. Okay. So that should be enough to get our inventory populated. Let's take a peek. And actually, I can just pause it. Awesome. You can see, there we go. We've got our tunic and our standard sword in those inventory slots. And we can see the other things here. I want to make one more change. I think having the quantity on these items is okay, but I don't like how it looks, especially when it's equipped. There's a couple things we could do here. We could remove the count only if it's equipped, or we could assume that there's only one of these in the game. And, you know, depending on the type of game you're making, you're going to have to make a judgment call. What works better for you? For me, because I don't imagine the players purchasing lots of the same item, I think there would only be one of each item in the world. I think that's how I would personally want to handle a game like this if I'm making a smaller scope game. So I'm simply going to just assume that there's only one. And on the equipment, we just won't display this number, okay? So let's go ahead and address that real quick. Now we can just go back to our inventory slot UI here. And where we're setting our text, let's just make a change. So see, we just came in here and said that if the data is null, make sure we clear those textures and the text, right? And then down here, we can set the texture, that's fine. But the label, we're going to do conditionally. And so what we'll do is we'll say if slot data dot item data, because that's how this is kind of structured, right? We've got an item data. Now, if you recall, when we set this up and when we were working on this, and we'll do a quick refresher, looking at we've got item data. Okay, so when I'm talking about this item data right here, that's one of these of type item data. But our equipment items are equipable item data, aren't they? Which extends from item data, but it's a unique class. So let's take that class name and let's come in here and we'll just say if that item data is an equipable item data node, okay, then we will handle it differently. And then we can say else. You know, if it's not, then just do the typical thing. Just put the quantity on here. And so then in this case, we'll just do the same. We'll just make a blank string, okay? And then if you have other types of item data that you want to do a different label with, you're welcome to do it with a new condition. So we'll just run the game one more time. And let's pick these up real quick. Okay, there we go. No more item counts on my weapons. And the inventory is still working. I can move through, select them, see the descriptions. What we haven't done today is make it so that so that we can actually equip and change items. And obviously we've got some values here that we need to deal with, but those we're going to do in the next video. So stay tuned. And make sure that you're following along and, subscribe to my channel if you want to see the update when the next one goes live. And I want to give a quick shout out to my Patreon supporters. Love you guys and thank you for all your support. And as always, we'll see you next time.